Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Stephanie Banks, a Marketing Manager at Perficient. I'm excited to be moderating today's webinar on what's next after the Google Search Appliance. We're recording today, and we'll be sure to send an email out with information on how to access this after the session. Time permitting, we'll answer questions at the end of the presentation, so please type those into the chat box on the bottom left of your screen. In a moment, I'll hand it over to our speaker, but first let me give you a quick overview of Perficient. Perficient is the leading digital transformation consulting firm serving Global 2000 and enterprise customers throughout North America. With unparalleled information technology, management consulting, and creative capabilities, Perficient and its Perficient Digital Agency deliver vision, execution, and value with outstanding digital experience, business optimization, and industry solutions. We have a broad network of locations across the U.S., as well as offshore facilities in India and China. We deliver digital experience, business optimization, and industry solutions that cultivate and captivate customers, drive efficiency and productivity, integrate business processes, improve productivity, reduce costs, and create a more agile enterprise. Founded in 1997, we're a public company with approximately 3,000 employees. We have formed strategic partnerships with major technology vendors and also have dedicated solutions and industry practices. And now a little background on our speaker. Eric Immerman is the Search Practice Director here at Perficient. He leads our team of subject matter experts and works closely with partner and open source search platforms. Eric has presented at partner and industry conferences, and he'll actually be presenting next week at Elasticsearch for those of you that are planning to attend. And to kick off the webinar, we'd like to start with 2 quick polling questions to see where everyone is on their path to adopting and implementing a search replacement for the Google Search Appliance. For the first question, where is your organization in its Google Search Appliance migration? You can select the following option that applies best to your organization. Are you evaluating search alternatives? Have you started your migration? Or have you completed your migration already? And we'll give everyone another moment to answer. All right, it looks like everyone is evaluating search alternatives, which makes sense for the topic of this webinar. For the next poll, we're asking, are you looking for an enterprise search or a public site search solution? And again, you can select the best option that applies to you. An enterprise search, public site search, or both search solutions. And again, let's wait another few seconds for people to respond. And it looks like there's a split between enterprise search and both search options. And now I'll turn the presentation over to Eric.
Thanks, Stephanie. So as Stephanie mentioned, I'm a delivery director for search here, and today I want to talk through the process of what's going on with the Google Search Appliance and Google Site Search. So quick agenda. First, we want to just talk through what is going on with it. What are the changes that are going to happen? What's the timeline, et cetera. Next, we want to start talking about considerations for replacing Google Search Appliance and the Google Site Search. So things like strategy, budget, timing, really the things you should be considering within your organization for moving off of the platform. Next, we'll talk about some of the different options that we see out there, from more of the build-it-yourself side to the full-featured, full implementation, machine learning, cognitive side. And then we'll give a demonstration of one of our products, a product named Perficient Nero, which is we're using Elasticsearch, one of the technologies we'll talk about, for providing a straightforward and price-conscious way of migrating off Google Search Appliance while still maintaining all of the same functionality. Okay. So first, what's going on with the GSS and GSA? So Google Search Appliance. I'm hoping you know most of this information already, but just to make sure we're at a bare minimum of understanding, the Google Search Appliance is going off of support, and by going off support, it means it's going to turn off and be unavailable once you hit your end of support date, plus a usually 30-day grace period. Currently, you can only extend support through the end of December 2018. So that means you need to have a solution in place and working before then, because if you don't, it's going to turn off and all of a sudden your search results aren't going to come back anymore. Google Site Search is a little bit sooner than that, right? That's March 31st. It does not turn off like a light bulb, but it fails back to what's known as Google Custom Search. Google Custom Search is essentially a embedded version of the public website search, and it has the negatives that you cannot control the results, you cannot control the formatting of results, and you cannot control whether ads are there in your results. The biggest worry we see around customers using Google Site Search in this area is theoretically, if you have a product that you have competitors on the internet who've done search optimization, you could potentially see ads for your competitors in your own result set. Not something that any company really wants. So this is happening towards the end of March 31st of this year. So if you still have Google Site Search up, make sure you're thinking very quickly about how you're going to get your content off of that and search it through another solution. It is generally not going to be possible to extend support of these platforms. Google is pretty straightforward that 12/31, 3/31 are going to be the end dates, and there's very few cases where they'll go beyond that. So what are the considerations you should have when replacing the GSA? We'll talk about this in 4 categories. The first is going to be strategic direction. So what role does search play in your organization? Basically, when the Google Search Appliance came out and when it really hit its heyday, search was people wanted to replace Google. Since then, it's evolved quite a lot, right? We've got a bunch of new technologies like contextual search, so being able to automatically understand where my user is in their journey through my website and provide them back proper results before they even ask for them. Natural language search. So if I ask questions, you get this in the Siri, the Alexa, the Google Home, where you can ask in plain English and get a conceptual result back as opposed to only the keyword matches, right? So now do we take that concept and expand that to our websites, our enterprise platforms, etc. And then finally, machine learning. How can I make it so that my results get better and better over time based on the usage of my system? How can I watch what the end outcome of every search is? Are users refining terms? Are users going through and, opening up a help ticket or calling into my customer support number afterwards? Do users talk to certain users more than other users, maybe their boss or their team members, and you should populate their results first or documents they've worked on first. A lot of these kind of machine learning techniques are being implemented in newer platforms to really provide better relevance for each user on more of a tailored individual basis. Next is going to be timeline. So as we've mentioned, there's kind of a hard drop-dead date you have to be off of some of these existing search platforms. Can you get there realistically? Can you get there with your desired solution, so your end goal, or do you need to consider an interim search solution? The most important thing at this point is getting off of your existing GSA or GSS implementation and to something that will work, right? No one wants to have a dead piece of software out there where you click search and your users just get frustrated as nothing comes back. Do you have resources and implementation partners lined up to make your deadlines and your timelines happen? Particularly towards the end of this year, around implementation partners, be them Perficient or anyone else, there are lots of users who need to get off the Google Search Appliance still. So you're not alone in the fact that you need to migrate off, but there is going to be kind of a rush for resources. So start considering this soon and lining this up in order to make sure that you have all of your ducks in a row in order to hit the deadlines that are needed. Next, we have budget. So what are your budgets for licensing and implementation of replacement? Do they match with your plans? So at a high level, what we've seen is a lot of customers are really, they're budgeting, in terms of licensing at least, continuing the existing Google Search Appliance price. And that's a fair way to look at it, but what you will notice is that if you're going for some of these higher end solutions, so you really want to get into the cognitive, the machine learning, the contextual, you're going to have a higher licensing price than you may have historically had with Google Search Appliance. Not always, but potentially. Many of these solutions are licensed by different models, so be them queries, number of users, amount of content indexed. There is some variation there. So some of the decisions around what platform you go with are probably going to fall under budgeting and licensing, and you'll need to make sure that you have that kind of understood and under control. On the other side, on implementation, it's generally not a, pick it up, drop it over, super easy, takes 5 minutes or takes a day migration from the Google Search Appliance to any other solution. There's going to be at least a little bit of implementation there, at least a month, let's say. You need to be ready to pay for that implementation or have your internal resources implement that migration because it's not a one-off, there's a tool for just I click this button and now it works in a new solution. Okay? Next is your environment implementation. So first high-level question is, are you looking for cloud or on-premises solutions? Over time, many of the solutions now are moving to be cloud-only or cloud primary. Quite simply, when you get into machine learning, you get into some of these more advanced technologies. The scalability of the cloud makes it much easier to manage a system where you might have heavy CPU requirements because you're analyzing a bunch of images or past data. If you need an on-prem solution, there are on-prem solutions out there that work very well, but it might restrict your pool of potential contenders who are implementing these solutions a little bit. The next is, what is your comfort level with building and maintaining your own solution? So Google Search Appliance was really kind of a set it and forget it solution in a lot of ways. People treat it as a black box. You set it up and then you walk away and it keeps kind of tuning relevancy in small ways on its own. There are tools out here, and we'll talk about this in a second, where you can have, for a low price, the ability to build out a full search solution from an algorithm from a power standpoint, but it doesn't have all of the kind of over-top automatic maintenance and user interfaces and ingestion pieces. So you end up more on that implementation and support side, taking a little bit of that burden. For some shops, that's no problem at all. If you have a technical team that's already working around this, already kind of looking at expanding the Google Search Appliance outside of maybe its core competencies, then maybe you're okay with that. You have no issue with that. For others, where if you just want to set something up and walk away, this will be a consideration when we are talking about which solutions you might want to go with next. So now, what are some options that we see for replacing the GSA? It should be said, these are not all of the options entirely, but these are what we see as really the contenders. And if you have any questions about any others, please feel free to ask. We can talk about them in the Q&A. But these are what we see as kind of the peak of the market, and I'll talk about where they apply. So at the first level, we have search engines, and that's going to be Elasticsearch and Solr. Elasticsearch and Solr have kind of taken the search world by storm over the past, let's say, 5 years at this point. They're both built on top of Apache Lucene, as are a couple of these other platforms. They are both open source, and they are both tremendously fast and tremendously scalable. Quite simply, most of the other solutions are using, not most, but many of the other solutions are using a flavor of Elasticsearch or Solr underneath because they really are much faster and much more scalable than implementations of old. That said, if you think of a search engine or your search platform as a car, Elasticsearch and Solr are the engines. They have all of the algorithms, all of the relevancy, all of the things that are needed to really make world-class search. However, they don't have all of the connectors for loading the data in, loading in the fuel. They don't have all of the interfaces for displaying your results in a clean way to your user. They'll provide APIs, but they're not going to have, here's the button where I click search, here's where I get my results back, here's how they're formatted, etc. So in Elasticsearch and Solr world, you can absolutely build out your search platform to whatever specification you'd like. They're very, very extensible and very powerful. However, you're going to need to do a bit of building or have a partner help you with a bit of building here. Okay? Elasticsearch is supported. You can purchase support from the company that makes Elasticsearch, which is named Elastic, and they provide Elasticsearch and some expansion functionalities around that in their XPack. Solr is purely open source and not supported, though there are some third-party companies who contribute to the Solr project who will provide support for you as well. Now when we go up a level, and this is going to be more of the full car, we're talking about search platforms here. So at the top level, we're going from more simple use cases to the more complicated use cases down at the bottom. At the top, we have SwiftType. So SwiftType is a search as a service that is right now available for public website search specifically. You log onto their website, you create an account, you tell it what site you'd like to search, and then it can go and index that site for you and automatically make that available for your customers. They provide nice APIs, nice interface snippets that you can integrate in to get search boxes and suggestions, etc. The one restriction as of right now is that they are not an enterprise search platform. There is no secured search within SwiftType. SwiftType was recently, at the end of last year, 2017, bought by Elasticsearch, and Elasticsearch is building that enterprise search into their core Elasticsearch framework. So this will have full enterprise search in the future, we believe, but as of right now, this is public website search focused. The next level down, we have LucidWorks. So LucidWorks is built on top of Solr, the search platform we were talking about, and it was built by some of the initial developers and contributors of Solr as more of a full service platform for search. It has some very nice kind of index pipelining and query pipelining technologies where instead of you having to do, as you used to in the Google Search Appliance days, do a bunch of ETL work or maybe custom work within your connector level, you can now load your data into LucidWorks and have it automatically go out and grab additional data or do data transformation as it is being indexed. This makes it a little bit more architecturally clean where you can now not have to have all this custom code. You can have little snippets or scripts that are being called here, including things like calling web services for doing maybe image recognition on images that you're loading in or audio transcription, for example. You can use Solr or LucidWorks on top of existing Solr environments if you already have Solr installed in your organization. And they do have great security and can handle both enterprise and anonymous use search cases. Next one down, we have IBM Watson. So Watson, many of the Watson technologies are built on top of Apache Lucene, which is the underlying library of both Elasticsearch and Solr, as we discussed before. Watson, where they really make their mark is in the natural language cognitive search space. So they have done a tremendous amount of work around being able to train their system so that it understands the concepts of your documents and understands the concepts of your content. So an example of this would be weather, right? If I search for weather in a traditional Google GSA type search engine, I'm going to get all the documents that have weather as a word in them. If I search for it in a Watson system and I have trained that on weather, now I can get all of the information about rainy, sunny, cloudy, snowy, all of the different concepts that make up weather and all the different types of weather get included into that weather concept, and now I have this cognitive natural language way to search for a concept rather than simply words. They also provide content analytics in some of their more advanced versions, and that's ways for you to look at the content that you've indexed and automatically compare and contrast that, determine correlations, determine relevancy, summarize, etc. Okay. Next on the list is a cloud search provider named Coveo. Coveo, I believe, will very shortly have an Elasticsearch offering as well, where they're storing their data inside Elasticsearch if you'd like to use that technology and keep some of your data on-prem for kind of a hybrid model. But Coveo's where they lead the market is going to be their analytics and their machine learning in terms of kind of user tracking usage analytics. So the ability to watch what my users are doing, automatically adjust my search results as a result. So see, maybe they searched for A, they didn't click anything, they changed that search to B, they still didn't click anything, they changed it to C, and now they clicked results. Okay, when I see somebody search for A or B, I'm going to start giving C's results as well, is a very simple way to picture that. What we find is that they offer very clean kind of interfaces and APIs to integrate their content, and they also offer a very kind of easy out-of-the-box machine learning models that are automatically going to tune your relevance for you and make this a little bit more of a hands-off from a relevancy tuning perspective. Okay. And then the last vendor to talk about does not have a product as of yet, but Google is shortly coming out with their Google Cloud Search platform. They are also focused on machine learning and essentially applying all of the advances that Google has made in machine learning throughout the rest of their products, but now to enterprise search. Now, Google Cloud Search has a couple of restrictions. First, it's only going to be general availability July 2018. So you've still got a few months until this is fully available. Next, it is enterprise search focused only. You have to have named users to use it. It does not support anonymous user search. So what they're looking to do with those named users and that named user information is use machine learning to determine relationships between the various users who are searching. So that if I search for an email from Mark and there's 50,000 Marks at my company, it's going to find Mark my colleague or Mark my boss and not Mark the guy over there in IT or in sales. Right? They're looking to automatically use that machine learning to help to enhance relevance based on the information profiles they can create about every user. Now, there may be public website search with Google Cloud Search in the future, but it is not part of this initial release, and Google has not released a roadmap for that. So do not plan to go to Google Cloud Search and say, oh, well, it'll definitely get there, and I've got to be able to make that work, because it's just quite simply the initial release will not have that functionality. Okay? Now, moving on, the one other platform we'd like to talk about is one that we've kind of been working on and developing out as a way for our clients to quickly get off of the Google Search Appliance, and we're calling it Perficient Nero. The idea here is for us to be able to very quickly help clients get off of a Google Search Appliance environment. So going through Nero, what is it? First thing is it's fast, simple website search. We want to be able to do quick setup. So the idea is to get this implemented for simple GSA implementations in under a month. Now, obviously, if you have a Google Search Appliance solution where you have 40 connectors and you're doing a bunch of custom work and everything else, it may take a little bit longer, but we're trying to minimize the amount of time to migrate as much as possible. We're doing this by taking a lot of the existing Google Search Appliance concepts with Google's permission, as well as integrating the existing Google Connector Manager framework so that we can reuse existing Google Search Appliance connectors you may already own and use, but instead integrate that data into Nero. Now, Nero is built on top of Elasticsearch. We include Elasticsearch support with Nero as a part of the subscription. So all of the library, all of the relevance, all of the power that you can get out of Elasticsearch, we build in by default with Nero. So relevant results, we're using many of Elasticsearch's algorithms underneath. So automatic stemming, automatic, doing synonyms, language detection and searching by language properly, automatically enhancing and increasing relevancy on results that have been clicked on in the past. All of these sorts of things are being integrated, are part of Nero, and they're going to be integrated into your environment so that you can have this clean, easy to install, easy to use environment. Next, we have a more modern display. So people either loved or hated the old Google Search Appliance XSLT interface style, right, where you'd write these massive XSLT files to essentially transform the XML results Google was giving you on the fly. So with Nero, I'm happy to say you do not need to use XSLT anymore unless you would like to. We do provide a modern website display built on Bootstrap.js. It's standard HTML, and it is fully customizable by the end user and administrator so that you can create this and modify this to work exactly how you would like it to look and function. We also do still provide API access, though, in the form of JSON APIs and a GSA-compliant XML file. So that XML API is going to allow you to continue to use the same XSLT transforms you've used previously. And then finally, because we're storing in Elasticsearch, if you have lower level developers who would like to work directly with the underlying search engine, we do provide access to the Elasticsearch REST APIs, which are a tremendously powerful set of APIs for interacting with and querying on your data. Why Nero? So the first reason is that we're flexible. So we want to be able to reuse your GSA connectors, which opens us up to a huge range of different sources, right? And naturally enough, they're the same sources you're already crawling. We also want to be able to kind of scale horizontally as far as we need to scale. So Elasticsearch has that built in just out of the box. That's how Elasticsearch works. So we start with 3 nodes of Elasticsearch, which should be good for 1 million documents at least, at scale. We do have the option to scale further, and when we scale, basically what we're doing is we're spinning up an extra Elasticsearch and Nero node, we're taking your data, we're splitting it into 1 additional chunk, and then all 4 servers now, instead of the 3, would be searching that data at once. Using this, we can scale to massive data volumes. We have customers on Elasticsearch that say 500 million documents, getting sub-second, sub-half-second response times. It all depends on the size of the cluster you put behind it, but there is no kind of tangible limit that anyone is going to hit in terms of, this index can't handle the amount of data that I have. Okay? Next, we're open source. So we're built entirely on top of open source, and we do provide all of our customers our source code as well. So you can have the source code, you can build it, you can see the tests we're running, you can automatically enhance it if you are interested. However, we do treat Nero as a subscription product. So you do get our support, you do get our developers, you do get all of our support in actually implementing this as well during the implementation time. So we're happy to work with you to customize the platform to meet your needs during that implementation. And then finally, we're enterprise grade. So enterprise grade in this case means that we run cloud or on-prem. We can run either in your tenant on the cloud, or we can host it ourselves and simply pass the hosting costs back to you. We are cloud agnostic, so we're happy to run on Google Cloud, AWS, or Azure. And we are on-prem, we are relatively infrastructure agnostic. As long as you can support Java 1.8 and Node.js, that's what we need in order to properly run Nero. We've installed on plenty of Linux variants, Unix, Windows, Mac. Really, whatever your whatever your on-prem infrastructure is, we're happy to work with you and make sure that Nero can run on that properly. Okay. As mentioned before, we are open source, so these are some of the technologies we're built on top of. So Elasticsearch is the underlying engine. Fess is a search framework that we are expanding upon to really give Nero the full enterprise capabilities. Tomcat is the web server that is used on many, many places at this point. Apache Tika is how we load in our content. So using Apache Tika, we can automatically read through any PDFs, Word documents, any standard file format, including images, which we can enable it to OCR on the fly as we're ingesting your content. The one caveat with ingesting OCR images is that it's pretty CPU intensive, so there may be a little bit of hardware considerations we take into place when doing the implementation during that scenario. And then finally, all of that runs on top of Java, Java 1.8 Server Edition specifically, and Kibana is our analytics platform that we're using. That runs on top of Node.js. So next, let's take a look at what we're actually talking about with Nero. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so I think everybody can probably share my screen, see my screen right now. So what we're looking at here is an instance of Nero that was spun up and is just indexing our Perficient website. Okay, so first thing is we see a pretty standard search interface. So here I'm just going to search for enterprise search. What you're seeing here is that we are suggesting results. Now, one thing to highlight about these suggestions is that we are initially pulling all of these suggestions out of the content of the documents that are in the system. As we have users use this system, these suggestions will then start to get pulled out of the queries that have been made in the past that have had successful results. This is a little bit different than the GSA where it's just based on past queries. During that process, you would often have with the GSA that when you initially installed it, your suggestions weren't very good and they got better over time. We're using the content of the documents to kind of provide a jump start, a quick start on that to make sure that you're getting relevant results, relevant information for your users as quickly as possible. Now, what you'll see is out of the box, our interface looks very, very similar to a traditional Google search, which most people know and understand as search on the internet or search on a computer these days. What we can do, or what we can highlight here, is if I type something wrong, let's say I type search, but I misspell it, we do have did you mean and misspelling detections. So here, I click on search, I get my results back. In analytics, we're tracking and showing you every query that had no results, and you can really kind of automatically start to improve these results based on these misspellings, what people are clicking, etc. Now, if we're looking into these results, on the right side here, we have labels and we have date ranges. This is a breakdown of faceting. So for this demo, I'll show you how we did this, but we're just breaking down into a label of what portion of the website we got our content from. This took maybe 20 seconds to set up. If we see that it's on a services page, let's pull services information. From this, it was pulled from the website URL, but we can also pull this from meta tags or actual content on a website if we're crawling as well. We can filter down, and we can filter by both time and the label. Now, these facets are infinitely expandable. So we allow custom facets in most major data types, including things like GeoIPs for location facets, or numbers for ranges, or dates. This can be built out and expanded as needed very easily. The only limitation is just making sure that from the connector that we're getting our content from, or from the site that we're indexing, we are getting all of the content that is needed. Okay. Now let's look at how we set all of this up. So here we normally would hide that login, but just for a demo it's here. I'm going to log into our admin portal. So step one, what you're seeing here is just an overview of the Elasticsearch cluster behind Nero. So here for a demo, we're running on one node. We can see where its heaps is at, disk, CPU, load, etc. From the IT perspective, they have full control and full understanding over what's going on behind the scenes from a usage and a utilization type standpoint. We can look through the various indexes that are created, including this one. This Nero index was created with 1,700 documents. And this is essentially a collection of documents that we are using for this result set, right? In terms of creating this collection, we went over here, we created a crawler. I went to the web, and I created a Perficient crawler. I specified where to start. In this case, I specified a sitemap, but it can be a sitemap or any page in your website. And I can specify what URLs I would like to include, what URLs I would like to index, and what URLs I would like to exclude. All of this is done via Java regular expressions, which is a pretty extensible just kind of scripting framework for selecting or identifying text. And the idea is that we can support a very broad configuration of how we would like to include and exclude results in our data sets. We then gave it a depth of search for 5 pages deep and get at most 100,000 documents. And we told it how many threads to run, how long to wait between searching for pages, and how high to boost the results from this specific crawler. Oftentimes at clients, we will have multiple crawlers crawling multiple parts of a website, and we might want to boost some more than the other. So we can do that at a crawler level, or I can show you how we can do that at additional levels as well. Okay, so now I've created this. From there, we go in and we have a scheduler. And this scheduler is able to go and have specific crawlers that we either can decide to run now, or we can say how frequently we want them to run. So this is the cron syntax that has been around on Unix for a very long time. It can run at any sort of time period of your imagination, every 15 minutes, every hour, etc. We also have the same scheduler across all of our different pieces in the system. So for generating thumbnails, purging thumbnails, generating, aggregating logs together, or purging old logs, creating suggestions and making sure that all of our suggestions are up to date and so forth. Now, one other thing in the crawler that we set up here was labels. So as I mentioned, we had those labels that were pretty quick to set up. All that we did was go into the label and say, I want to have a label for insights for anything where we have a path of insights or blogs.perficient.com. Okay? From then on, anything I crawl, it's automatically going to apply those labels and apply that metadata. This concept can be expanded out to your meta tags, to other pieces of information. So we found that quite often using this label functionality and the automatic labeling, we can get rid of some of the push feeds that were needed for some GSA website crawling, right, where you would have to push some additional metadata behind the scenes. Now, in terms of also connections, we do have GSA connectors available. So as you'll see here, I can click on a GSA connector manager. I can go into one of them. All I do when setting this up is I just give it a name and a URL, and then I say update. It loads it, and then if I go into my connectors, I get the connectors that I have found, and I can edit this and get to all of the various settings for those connectors. I can add new connectors, I can do what I need. Those connectors we then update and say, send your information to Nero's GSA connector address instead of your GSA's connector address, and Nero will automatically pull that content in and index it into your environment. Right? So works very similar. You shouldn't even have to redeploy your connectors ideally. We only would have to change essentially the output address of those connectors. Now, from connectors or crawlers, there are quite a few other options that we have here. So we can do things like key matches or doc boosts. Doc boosts are condition-based, so it's not that we would just give a name of a document to boost, but we could do something like file type equals text/CSS, or colon text CSS, and then boost it by -100. I don't want to see text CSS documents. Create that, and now whenever I run a query, automatically text CSS stuff is going to be dropped in my result rankings. Now, these different file type or these different doc boosts can be done on any parameter in your system, any meta tag, any facet that you have. It does not have to be title, it does not have to be content, it doesn't have to be anything standardized. We can also do things like create related content. So before you saw I searched enterprise search. So here I'm going to say enterprise search. And I'm just going to give a content, and here I'm just typing a little bit of HTML out, right? And I'm not a web developer. I don't claim this to be fancy HTML or anything that's going to look great. But what we can do here is if I create my related content at the top, and then I go back and search for enterprise search, I get a nice little banner at the top about how I love enterprise search. This can be full HTML, full banners, full forms, full suggestions. We often see this on websites where clients might have activating a product or requesting a quote, and we pop up a form that automatically suggests that they send something to a customer, or so that they send something to a salesperson. So here we have this ability to kind of not only make your search results static search results, but to very easily allow you to customize them to meet your client's needs. Okay? Now, moving forward along, we also have the ability here to have things like related content. If you have two pieces of content that are very similar, related queries. So if I search for enterprise search, also pull back search. We do support authentication both on the crawling and the indexing and the retrieval side. So web authentication, I can go and create basic digest NTLM and form authentication currently. We are working on supporting some of the additional GSA authentication types right now. Specifically, the one that we're looking at this moment is cookie cracking, as that's a pretty advanced one that the GSA includes that is used quite a few places. However, for the other side of this, where we have users who are logging in, we do keep our own security cache. We can access your security over LDAP or SAML. And we can automatically tag every document with the proper role at a document level rather than simply an index or a crawling level. So you can document by document preserve access rights and display proper secured content to the user. Okay. Now here in the system info, we do give you the ability to back up your configuration. We do give you the ability to search for specific results and modify them. If I search for enterprise search again, I can go into this result and I can delete a result I don't like, right? I can update that result and we get the full information about the content, the file name, all of the different features of that result, and you have full possibility to customize those if needed. We also give the ability for you to go in and change things like page design. So here you'll see, here's all the different results page. Here I have search results. I can edit this and immediately, without having to go to the underlying servers, just from the interface, get the current HTML and edit it. This is a feature that can be restricted to just maybe your developers, but it does allow you to kind of have a much more fluid search experience than you may used to have had with the Google Search Appliance. Okay. Then finally, we have analytics in here. Now, we're not going to compete with the best of the best on analytics, and to be honest, we're probably not trying to, but we do have all of the analytics that you're used to from the Google Search Appliance. So here we're just looking at, this is for this exact site that we're looking at, queries per minute, what our average response time is to render results. We can go in and all of these results that you see here are linked. So if I click and highlight over a certain time period, I can see the result, the queries, number of queries for that time period, the average response time. I can see which queries were searched by, which had results, which did not. If I hit back, I can always zoom out. And as mentioned, everything is linked. So if I want to zoom in for when enterprise search was searched, now I can see exactly when that was there. Any piece of information that you have in your metadata, so your facets for your search, can be added to these analytics. So if you wanted to search for who is searching for blogs on your website, or who is searching for maybe referral pages or contact forms, we can automatically have that here, and we can add that as a filter so that you can break down and filter your search information as needed. Along this, we also are using Elasticsearch's wonderful metric beat plugin to automatically pull and display the underlying performance of your system. This will give IT very low-level, alertable statistics on your search system. So I can see what my CPU usage is per process, how the memory is working. I can go and I can look at things like storage and file systems on each of my hosts. We can aggregate it across all of your hosts at once. And as mentioned, this is all alertable. So you can get automatic notifications if your search system is having any issues so that you can respond to them right away. Okay? So this has been just a brief demo of Nero. At this point, I think we can probably turn the session over to questions. So if you have any questions, I believe you can please type them. There is, I believe, a questions option on your webinar. Please type any questions in, and then we can respond to them as they come in.
Great, thanks, Eric. So as Eric mentioned, we'll move on to the questions period. There is that chat box in the bottom left of your screen if you've got any questions. We've had a couple questions come in during the session, so we'll start with those. So there were a few questions about other search platforms that weren't mentioned in the presentation. So Eric, could you speak to where Microsoft and Mindbreeze fit into the vendor landscape?
Absolutely. So Microsoft. Microsoft at a high level, I personally and quite a few others at this point no longer consider an enterprise search vendor. So Microsoft has two different search tools, Search in SharePoint, and they have Delve, which is their search for their Office 365 system. Both of them provide good search results out of those specific systems that they service, so within SharePoint or within Office 365, and they provide the ability to add third-party content sources in, albeit in very limited and kind of tough to interact with ways. Delve's a little bit easier to add third-party content to, but it has a major flaw that any content that is added into your system, the Microsoft content is always going to have the highest relevance. You cannot get third-party content to be on equivalent relevance rankings with something like a Microsoft Office doc out of Office 365, right? So that really limits the functionality of Delve as an enterprise search platform. Okay. At this point, I believe it's Forrester has now taken Microsoft out of its Magic Quadrant for, or its rankings for the search space, and they're really kind of not even pursuing that space anymore going forward. Mindbreeze is one of the other ones. So for anyone who doesn't know, Mindbreeze is a search appliance vendor out of Germany, I believe. They are kind of the most one-to-one from a very high level standpoint comparison with the GSA in that they ship you hardware and you take that appliance, put it in your data center, and integrate it and use that to search. Right? The biggest problem I see with Mindbreeze is that is going to be support. They do not offer even same-day support. Their only support is next-day web support. So if you have a critical issue and you're a company that relies on search, as many do, that's probably not going to cut it for a lot of people. The other issue is they've got a good technology, but it's still developing into more of the modern standards that people come to expect out of search technologies right now. So they have a custom SDK for a lot of their search and integration stuff, right? They have more limited connectors, and they give you an SDK to build your connectors, but it's not quite as clean as some of the things that we've seen with the other solutions that are mentioned, the LucidWorks, the Coveo, the Watson. So from that perspective, we don't consider them quite in the same tier. Can they do enterprise search? Yes. We just don't think they're going to be quite as good at it as some of the others that we've mentioned today.
Great, thanks. And the next question is, what's the level of effort to migrate GSA and its connectors over to Nero?
So at the simple level, so if we're talking, basic website search, maybe one simple connector, not a huge amount of security, it's probably going to be in the, say, 3 to 4 weeks range. Give it about a month of implementation effort. And that would be setting up Nero either on the cloud or on-prem. It would be indexing your content, helping your team integrate Nero's results or integrate Nero's website into your page that you want to display the results on, and then training your Nero admins to administer Nero and actually use the platform. There's generally not a lot of end user training needed, though we will offer it if you would like. But quite simply, most everyone who uses a computer has used Google these days, and Nero doesn't work too differently from a standard Google search. At the other end, if it gets more complicated, we can potentially, it could potentially scale out quite a bit further if you've got 40 connectors and so on. So I don't want to give an upper bound there, but we do work to make it to migrate over as quickly as possible.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Eric. I appreciate it. Looks like that's, we did have one other question come in right now. What level of infrastructure is required for Nero?
In terms of Nero infrastructure, basically the base Nero setup is good for about 1 million documents. It is 3 nodes of Elasticsearch and 3 nodes of Nero. So generally we would say 3 to 6 servers. The Nero servers can be a bit lower weight. They don't need to be big. They can be on VMs, though if it's a public website, you might want to have dedicated hardware simply from base performance options. Internal VM may be no issue. Elasticsearch is generally a little bit hungrier. It wants a little bit more memory. Our initial node sizes are 16 gigabyte nodes, so we would recommend 32 gigs of RAM on each of the servers underlying Elasticsearch. And we would also, if possible, recommend you have SSD storage underneath those servers. Quite simply just because Elasticsearch does lots of random data access lookups, so SSDs do provide a little bit of a performance benefit. The demo you've seen here today is obviously it's a small site, but that is just running on, I believe that's 8 gigabytes of RAM and a SSD hard drive of 64 gigs underneath. It's really very small comparatively. That 3 nodes of hardware does provide HA and DR included, by the way. So where the GSA, you used to need kind of have a separate GSA instance in the background. With Elasticsearch and with Nero, Elasticsearch, when it creates the data, and the way that we create the data, we create a copy of all data on each of the 3 nodes, and it's automatically updated and synced across those 3 nodes in real time as things are being indexed and users are searching. If any individual node goes down, the other 2 pick up the entire response for those other 2 nodes. So you can lose 2 out of those 3 nodes and still maintain the system being up, having no issues in performing. Simply, you may see slightly degraded experience under high loads if you have only 1 out of your 3 nodes running for a large environment. As before, we can scale ad infinitum. So if you had larger than 1 million documents, say you're getting up to that 10, 100, et cetera, million range, there's no kind of hard number for how many documents you can have on that 3 Nero server cluster, right? It's basically if you are indexing, massive documents potentially. So you're indexing, gigabyte documents, for example, or you have lots and lots of metadata around it. You're pumping entire databases full of information to each of your search results that might not go quite as far. Realistically, we're able to scale out to additional nodes as needed. And when you start hitting your performance threshold that you deem unacceptable, and adding additional nodes is essentially a near linear increase in, if I add 1 additional node, I'm going to get 25% faster. To each one is going to be 20% faster, so I'll be 40% faster, and so on. Any other questions, Steph?
I believe that's it. And if we happen to miss your question, we'll definitely reach out in the near term to help answer those. As you can see on the screen, we've got a couple links that allow you to stay current with Perficient's blogs, white papers, upcoming webinars. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we'll be at ElasticCon next week where we'll be sponsoring and presenting. So hope to see you at that conference if you're planning on attending. And thanks again for everyone for joining on the webinar. And within the next few days, we'll share a link to the recording. And we hope everyone has a great afternoon.